Dear viewers, greetings from London studio of British Bangla News. I am Mojibur Doftori. This program is broadcasting from Facebook Live and YouTube Live of British Bangla News from London. Today, our guest is Mr. Niels van den Berge, MP, Member of Parliament. He is a member of Dutch Parliament from Green Left Party. He is also a spokesperson for his party Green Left on justice, police, intermediate vocational education, science, and integration. This is his second term as an MP in Dutch Parliament. He is politically active from his school years. In 2007 and 2008, he was the Environmental Transport Policy Officer at Green Left in European Parliament. Since 2012, he worked in development sector in Bangladesh. In 2017, he coordinated a project on safe drinking water in Bangladesh that was arranged by UNICEF, Government of Bangladesh, and civil societies of Bangladesh. Niels is happily married to a Bangladeshi woman, Shampa Bala van den Berge. Shampa Bala is a daughter of Borishal or southern Bangladesh region of Bangladesh, particularly from Muladi, Upazila. Warm welcome, Mr. Niels van den Berge, MP. Most
Thank
welcome.
you. Good afternoon. Shubho Bikal.
Great. So, my viewers, Mr. Niels van den Berge, MP, has said Shubho Bikal bolechen tini from here. So one sentence in Bengali he has already told. I hopefully he will tell more Bengalis to you at certain point. Before I go to ask question to our guest today, I will draw a picture of immigrants in Europe and interesting historical facts on Dutch involvement in Bengal, that is present-day Bangladesh and Indian state of West Bengal. In 2010, 47.3 million people lived in the European Union who were born outside the resident country. Immigrants are 9.4% of total EU population nowadays. It's a significant portion. Of those, 6.3% were born outside the European Union and 3.2% born in another EU member state. The largest number of immigrants born outside EU in 2010 were Germany. It has 6.4 million immigrant population. France, 5.1 million. UK, 4.7 million. Spain, 4.1 million. Italy, 3.2 million. Sweden, 2 million. That is 20% of the total population. And Netherlands, 1.4 million. And Finland, 446,000 people. Switzerland, which is not a EU country, that is outside the EU country, but a Schengen area country, has 2.3 million immigrants. And immigrants form 28.9% of the total population of Switzerland. Major groups of immigrants in Europe are from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. 9 million Turks live in Germany, Netherlands, Austria, and some other countries. And 5 million Arabs live in France, Italy, and Spain. 5 million Black Africans live in France, Italy, and Spain. 2.5 million Indians live in UK, Netherlands, Germany, and elsewhere. And Bengalis or Bangladeshis live, 600,000 Bengalis live in UK. 85,000 in Italy, 35,000 in France, also in Spain, Sweden, Finland, and Greece. Now, I'll talk about Dutch involvement in Bengal and the world as a global power. It was early stage of globalization that a Dutch company initiated. Later, it was overtaken by Dutch government. Dutch East India Company was established in 1602 as a company to do trade with Mughal India. Based in Amsterdam, housed in East India House, this company was one of the major players in the world that time. From 1610 to 1800, 50% of textiles and 80% silks were imported from Bengal, Suba of Mughals to Dutch Empire in the world. And this Dutch company did spice trade and also colonized in many parts of India and many other parts of the world. And before now, we know what the city, very famous city, New York. It was once named as New Amsterdam. And Netherlands is a seafaring nation. This company had trading posts all around the world at that time, and it was in big naval power in the Indian Ocean and Asia Pacific. It has navy fleets that time. And Dutch East India Company was one of the forerunner of modern corporations. It was one of the early proponents of globalization. It was one of the greatest or largest or richest company in the world. And British East India Company modeled their own company based on this Dutch East India Company. And British East India Company colonized Bengal in South Asia in 1757 in the Battle of Plassey, and introduced British rule, company rule, later British rule in Bengal, as well as in total South Asia later. And as a result, English became a second language of Bangladesh and South Asia. This Dutch company had to fight their competitors like Portuguese company and British company in Asia. And 1759, the last Anglo-Dutch battle took place in Bengal, and that made the final fate of the Dutch in Asia outside Indonesia. If the result of this was different in 1759 war in Bengal, the history of Bangladesh and that of South Asia could have been completely different. There could be a Dutch colonialism in India, and instead of this British colonialism, who am talking to Mr. Niels Berge here in English, I could talk to him in Dutch because of potential if it was Dutch colonialism, if the Dutch side won the war. So, and whole South Asian language could have been Dutch instead of English. And still there are some sites, Dutch heritage site in India and also Bangladesh. One of them is Kasim Bazar Dutch Cemetery in West Bengal. And there are signs of Dutch mixed with Bengal population we can find in Sandip Island of Bangladesh. There you can see some people have different color of hair, different color of eyes, and skin color. So this is a kind of symptom that once long ago there was some Dutch involvement in this area. And International Institute of Asian Studies, IAS, based in Leiden, Netherlands, has extensive research on Dutch maritime presence, colonialism, and its cultural significance in Asia. So those who are interested in this Dutch history in South Asia and Southeast Asia, you can please see the homepage of International Institute of Asian Studies, IAS, Leiden. So Mr. Niels Berge, thank you so much for listening patiently to my information to the audience. So you live in Hague, the city that hosts International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, and the Peace Palace. So please tell us, our audience in Europe, America, Bangladesh, and the world, about why and how did you come into politics and in Dutch Parliament?
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mojibur. So, as you already said in the introduction about me, I started politics and my political career at a very young age when I was in secondary school, because I had a lot of opinions about all kinds of topics, like about justice and equal sharing of welfare, about fighting climate change. So I then joined the youth organization of my party. Which is for the people that didn't turn 18 yet, who are not yet adults. So I joined this party, this youth wing, when I was 50 years old, I think, so a long time ago. That was before 2000, before the year 2000. And then after that, I started doing different things in my party. So as you rightly said, I worked as a policy advisor in the European Parliament. I worked as a policy advisor in the Dutch Parliament as well, and now I'm currently a member of Parliament.
Okay, thank you. That's great. So tell us about your involvement with development cooperation projects with Bangladesh. How did you come across your Bangladeshi wife? If it's not too personal question.
No. That's okay, Dr. Mojibur. So in 2012, after my first political career, you could say, because I was a member of parliament in 2011 as well. In 2012, I decided that I wanted to go abroad to work in another country in development. And then I looked into different projects. I wanted to work with farmers and in a project linked to climate change. And that's how I ended up working in Bangladesh with voluntary services overseas, VSO. I worked with VSO in Birampur. It's a small town in the district of Dinajpur. I lived there for a year. And that's also how I met my wife Shampa, because she was actually working in the Dhaka office of VSO.
Okay, that's great. Nice to hear about it. So, what is the landscape of immigrants in Netherlands? I mean, what is the composition? What is the strength of the population, and what is the general situation over there?
Well, what we see is the Netherlands has always been a country of immigrants. We've always had a lot of immigrants in our country, also because of our past, I think. We've always, as you already said in the introduction, we've always been a trading nation. So at a very early stage in the 17th century, Dutch sailors sailed to, for example, Indonesia and other countries as well, also to Suriname in Latin America. And so we've always had a lot of immigrants because they also came to the Netherlands to live. Amsterdam has always been, already back then, also a safe haven for minorities who were not safe in their own countries. So we always hosted both immigrants who came for trade, as well as also, you could say, early political refugees. So, for example, religious minorities. We've always had a pretty large Jewish community in Amsterdam, to give one example. So yeah, and still now we have quite a lot of immigrants, both refugees who come from unsafe countries as Syria, for example, but also economic immigrants who come to the Netherlands because they think they can find a better future here. So we are a very diverse country, a country with many immigrants from all parts of the world, you could say. And what we see is that what's important for my party, for the Dutch Green Party, is that we work on building an inclusive society together, in which everyone, both you could say the initial white Dutch people as well as immigrant people. So we find it very important that immigrants have proper housing, that they can find jobs, that they can learn the Dutch language. So that's something we work on very hard to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you. So, what challenges some of the immigrant groups are facing there in the Dutch society? What are the major challenges, in your opinion?
Well, I think also looking at my own wife Shampa, but also other friends who are immigrants, and I've been an immigrant in Bangladesh, right? So I know what it's like to be an immigrant in another country. I think there's different types of challenges that immigrants face in the Netherlands. One of them is, I think, a discrimination. This is a very serious challenge. We see, for example, that immigrant people in the Netherlands, they face serious challenges to find jobs. To name one example. So I think that's one thing, discrimination, and we are fighting that as a Dutch Green Party. Another challenge, I think, is adapting to the Dutch culture. I think, especially if you come, for example, from a country like Bangladesh, the Dutch culture is really very different. Like in Bangladesh, there's a lot of hospitality. People are very outgoing, very extrovert, you could say. And in the Netherlands, I think people are also hospitable in our own ways, but it's in a different way because, for example, we like our privacy, to give one example. So we don't invite a lot of people in our houses unless they are close to us. So that can be a challenge because I have seen in Bangladesh, when I meet a new person on the street, they will invite me to their house to have food, So I think if you come to the Netherlands, originally it can look like it's hard to meet new people. But I know a lot of immigrants succeed to do that. But I would say the second challenge is really adapting to the Dutch culture, because it's so different than, for example, the Southeast Asian culture. But then a lot of people are doing that in a very successful way.
Yeah, thank you. So the Netherlands has a long history with immigrants. So are there some role model immigrants in your society who have successfully integrated with Dutch society, which they can work as a model for other European immigrants?
Yes, I think we have several very successful examples. Like, for example, our chair of the Dutch Parliament has an immigrant background. The mayor of Rotterdam has an immigrant background. So there are examples, famous football players who now play in the Dutch national team who have an immigrant background. So I think in all places in our society you will find role models at universities, scientists, successful lawyers, businessmen and women. So I think there are a lot of role models of people who really succeeded in finding their own space in Dutch society and being successful here.
That's great to hear that. So what is the difference about integration of immigrants in the Netherlands comparing to that of United Kingdom and France, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's difficult for me to answer because I don't know France and the UK as well as I know the Netherlands. But one of the things I saw in the UK, for example, is that a lot of Bangladeshi people are living together, right, in specific areas in London. And I think what we try to do in the Netherlands, although we're not always succeeding in that as a government in terms of policies, but is also to have integration in a way that people live together in the same neighborhoods, that children with an immigrant background go to school with children without an immigrant background. So that might be a difference, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure because I don't know enough about the situation in the UK and France when it comes to integration and immigration comparing to the Netherlands. I know more about the Dutch situation, obviously.
Okay, thank you so much. I think there is more ghettoization among the immigrants in UK and France comparing to the Netherlands, I guess. I'm not sure.
Yes, I think so too. That's my impression, but I don't know the exact figures, so I can't say for sure. But I think in general, we have a tradition in the Netherlands of integration in a way that children go to the same schools, so children with an immigrant background and without. So I think we have less, traditionally, in that sense, less exclusion. Although I have to say that if you look nowadays, we face serious problems in big cities as well in terms of segregation. And segregation is basically the opposite of integration, right? When you talk about segregation, you see that people with similar ethnic or religious backgrounds tend to end up together in the same neighborhoods, which are sometimes poorer neighborhoods. So the houses are not as good as in other neighborhoods. The schools are not as good. And that's something we are trying to fight as the Dutch Green Party, because we believe in integration and diversity and in people living together in diversity. But I think you're right from an historical point of view, Dr. Mojibur. I think it's right that we have, in the past, I think we've been more successful in integration and living peacefully together in diversity. So with space for our own beliefs and preferences. But if I look at the situation at the moment in the Netherlands, I'm pretty worried about the segregation.
Okay, thank you so much. I think you have some similarities with Nordic countries like Finland, Norway, Sweden, or Denmark, more or less similar.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And Netherlands has a long history of humanitarianism, liberalism, multiculturalism, and tolerance. What gave the rise to the far-right anti-immigrant politics in your country, like in many other European ones?
Yes, that's a very good question, actually, Dr. Mojibur, because I'm very worried about this development, about the rise of xenophobic, populist parties, as we see in many countries at the moment, and also in the Netherlands, unfortunately. I don't know the exact answer, because if I would know, I would have been successful probably in fighting this development. But what I do see happening is that when things are regressing, so to say, right? So after many prosperous years, we've had the economic crisis in 2008, for example, and we have the Corona crisis at the moment. And what you see happening is that there are people who do believe that immigrants have something to do with these problems. And there are xenophobic populist politicians like Wilders and Baudet in the Netherlands who are like, they are, you could say, throwing petrol in the fire, because they are firing this up, and they are saying, you see, it's the fault of the immigrants. So what to say? I mean, I don't know the exact answer, but what I do see happening, and we've seen that in the past as well in Europe and also in other parts of the world, that especially in times of crisis, when things are not going as we want them to go, there are people looking for scapegoats, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what you see happening now. We have a lack of social housing in the Netherlands, for example. There are simply not enough social houses. The reason for that is that we haven't built enough houses during the economic crisis, for example, because there was not enough money to build them. But what people like Wilders and Baudet do is they say, well, we don't have enough houses for the Dutch people because there are too many immigrant people coming taking the houses. I mean, this is not true, but this is what they are saying, and there are people who believe this, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you for your explanation, Mr. Niels. Is it not paradoxical that Netherlands has low population growth like many other European countries, and it needs migrant workers in agriculture and heavy industries for its national needs, and yet there is anti-immigration feeling among a section of the people? What are the real causes of this paradox?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question too. I think so. We have a low population growth, but we are a densely populated country, not as densely populated as Bangladesh. I think Bangladesh is the second
High,
most
very
densely
high.
very high, right? I think the Netherlands is seventh. I'm not sure, but we are very high in this list. So we are our country is pretty full if you look at the Netherlands, and everything is very organized.
Yes.
So that means that industry is in one specific location, residential areas, agricultural areas, and people do feel that our country is pretty full, though we have a low population growth. That might be a cause, but yeah, you're totally right that there is a paradox, because we do need skilled labor, for example, in healthcare, in housing, in many sectors. And as we don't have these skilled labor people sufficiently in the Netherlands, we will require skilled labor from other countries. That's for sure. I mean, no doubt. But this is a message that that a lot of people might not like. At the same time, also to put a bit of nuance to this, it's also true that still a lot of people in the Netherlands, and I think the majority, has nothing against immigrants, right? So discrimination and racism is not something that the majority of the people is feeling or acting on. But yeah, I mean, if a minority is doing it, and this minority is large enough to cause problems for people with an immigrant background, then of course the reality is very harsh and it is causing problems.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. Is the anti-immigrant feeling centered around non-European immigrants or also against European Union citizens living in the Netherlands? And why? Is it because about skin color or perceived low income of certain groups or fear of being overtaken by outsiders that is losing their control? What it is exactly?
Well, yeah. So I think the anti-immigrant feelings of people is mainly projected against immigrants from outside of Europe, but not entirely, because we've recently also seen the sentiment growing of anti-immigration feelings towards people from Eastern European countries, so from Poland and Bulgaria, for example. Yeah, and the reason for that is, I think that also those people are being scapegoated. So there's a lot of people, or a lot, but quite some people came from Poland and Bulgaria to work in Dutch greenhouses to cut cucumbers and tomatoes, for example, and to do other work. And then when unemployment is going up, for example, at times of crisis in 2008 and currently because of the corona crisis, politicians like Wilders and Baudet, who are anti-immigrant, they will say that, yeah, this unemployment is caused because all the immigrant people came, which is not true because they are working in sectors where we don't have sufficiently skilled labor, because most of our population is these days highly educated. So that's the reason why we have a shortage of skilled labor people who have a vocational education background. So what they say is not true, but I think by saying it, they are tapping into a feeling of people, right? So I think in times of crisis, that's what you always see is people get scared of the changing reality. They get scared because they feel, well, we don't have control over the situation anymore. What's happening? I might lose my house, my job, etc. And then there are politicians and also other opinion makers. It's not only politicians who look for scapegoats. And unfortunately, there are people buying this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your explanation. What is the best way of integration, considering immigrants as individuals, or religious communities, or ethno-linguistic communities? What is the best way? How to consider immigrants as?
Well, in the end, I believe we should, especially as a policymaker, I should consider immigrants as individuals, because especially in a liberal modern country as the Netherlands, people want to be treated. Also, a lot of immigrant people want to be treated as individuals, right? And I think in the end, people are individuals because we make our own individual choices, and in the end, it doesn't matter so much where you came from. And of course, an individual choice of a person can be that you want to feel very strongly connected to a specific religious community, that you go to the mosque or to the temple, for example, when you're a Hindu or a Buddhist, or that you want to have a certain cultural community you belong to. Like my wife and I in the Netherlands, for example, we also participate in the Dutch Bangla community. For example, during Poila Boishak, we go to festivities. So, of course, Shampa, my wife, and I, we are part of the Dutch Bangla community as well. But in the end, I think we are individuals. Yeah, which doesn't mean that we should always live as an individual and be selfish. That's a different thing, right? Because we are individuals, but of course, part of collectives. As the Dutch Bangla community is such a collective. My party is a collective. The society as a whole is. So we are part of different collectives. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's about multiple identities that probably you wanted to say. You have multiple identities. You are part of everything. It's not one against another. No.
Exactly, and people should be able to make their own choices in which layers they want to have in a multiple identity, right?
Exactly. Thank you so much for enlightening us about this. So, how do you see Brexit? Is it a defining moment for European Union, and why?
Yes. Well, of course, whether it's defining in the end will depend on how the Brexit is being done. Whether we get a hard Brexit, so you could say like a hard divorce, right, with a fight and no treaty, or whether we get a more soft Brexit in which we agree on common rules and visa agreements and trade agreements and things like that. But in a way, it is a very defining moment because it's the first time that an EU member state leaves the EU. So whatever happens, in a way, it is already defining now. But in what way it will be defining will also depend on what kind of deal will be negotiated between the UK and the EU. Because, on the one hand, I really want a soft Brexit because I think it's in the interest of both the UK, the Netherlands, and thirdly of the EU as a whole. That we will be strong partners. We will still be strong partners in the future, the UK and the EU. On the other hand, if they get a very beneficial deal, then it could happen that other countries with xenophobic parties will also think, well, if the UK is able to have this kind of beneficial deal with the EU, So that's a dilemma in a way, right? Because if the deal is too beneficial, other countries might seriously think about following the UK to leave the EU, and that would be something I would be very much against, because I like the EU project very much, and I think it has brought us a lot in terms of prosperity, peace, human rights. So I hope this project will continue and will be further developed.
Yeah, thank you. I think EU is a peace project, that is to say. So
That's how it started. Yeah, definitely.
I also wish the best of success of European Union in that, and people can move freely within Union. They can. I mean, it's an excellent thing. Thank you so much. So, how do you see religious radicalism among a section, a minority section of immigrants, like other European nations? Some Dutch citizens also went to fight for ISIS in the Middle East. What are the causes behind such violent extremism, living in a good society, democratic society, welfare society?
Yeah, so earlier on we talked about multiple identities. I think in this case there are multiple causes when it comes to radicalization, because I've read quite some studies about it, and I talked with quite some scientists about it. But, I mean, there are several causes. One of them, I think, is the role that, for example, social media plays in reaching young people with maybe radical views, but who are not yet extremists, and they get extremist messages from, for example, IS or other radical groups, and they feel attracted to those messages and they radicalize. It's also true, what we see from studies is that one of the reasons why young people feel attracted to this is because they kind of feel excluded from the society they live in. So in our case, the Dutch society. And I think that has a lot to do with what we talked about earlier, with discrimination, segregation. So if young people feel they are not at home in the Netherlands, they are not welcome in our society somehow, they might be very attracted, especially young people, as their brains are often not fully developed yet, right? They might feel very attracted to messages of extremist groups that make them feel at home. If they think, well, I'm at home at IS, and they have something to offer to me, and I have to travel to the Caliphate to fight for for their war, that's a very dangerous thing if they feel more at home over there than in our liberal modern country. So I think this is something we have to fight with multiple solutions, starting with making those people feel at home here, and talking with them. And yeah, it's also true, by the way, because we talk a lot about IS now and about this form of extremism, but there has always been different forms of extremism in the past as well, right? Sometimes religious, sometimes political. We've had extreme leftish extremism in the past, so by radical communist groups. Now it's radical Islamic groups, or at least they call them like that because they think you can question how religious they really are, but that's a different discussion. So it's of all times. And sometimes people say, well, it's always poorly educated people who don't know a lot, but that's not true, because I experienced myself in Bangladesh when I was living there in 2016. We had the attack on the Holy Bakery, right? In Gulshan, terrible. A few acquaintances of us also got killed there. Well, not close friends, but people we knew very well, and we sometimes went to that place as well. So we know it very well. But anyway, what I wanted to say is that most of the extremists who did this attack on Holy Bakery, they were highly educated children. They even went to private schools in Malaysia. So saying that it is a problem of low educated youngsters who don't know what they are doing, that I think that's too easy of a solution. There's more causes to it.
I think it's all about politics, and people try to use religion for how to go to power. They want to go to power by any means. And there are some other groups who are behind these powerful groups. It's anywhere in the world, not only in Bangladesh. And I think the social media, particularly YouTube, has been used as a propaganda tool not only in Bangladesh, but also in many other parts of the world. So disinformation, hate speech is going on. I think,
Yes.
how the government can handle this in policy and practice.
Mhm. Well, I think what is very important is that in education, for example, so I'm also spokesperson on education for my party. I think it's very important that we pay more attention to awareness raising about fake news, hate speech, and make you could say make young people more resilient in a way to these threats. The other thing is, I think that we should be very much open to diversity. I think as long as it is within the limits of our laws and human rights, there should be maximum space for diversity. So we should give young people the feeling that they are part of our society, even if they are different than the average person. They are still part of our society, so that they feel less attracted to those messages from outside through social media. And it's very important in terms of support to keep the dialogue going with young people who feel attracted to these messages, because I think one of the reasons why social media are so can cause such risks is also because, of course, when you watch videos of radical preachers, for example, on YouTube, there's and you feel attracted to those messages, there's nobody challenging you at that point in time, right? And you can watch the next video and the next one and the next. There's no one asking you that, do you actually really believe this? Why do you believe this? Couldn't you look at it from a different angle? So critical thinking and awareness raising among not only young people, by the way, also older people, but I think especially for young people, it's very important that we work on that as a society, as policymakers, as teachers.
Yeah, thank you. And some people think that by following these religious mullahs, they can ensure this life as well as afterlife. So they believe in the interpretation of this kind of mullahs, so that this is the authentic Islam in case of Muslims. So that's why they follow them, I guess. And thank you so much. Yeah, please.
There may be one remark. What has been very successful in the Netherlands is that actually we've had other imams from the Netherlands or from other countries, but who are living in the Netherlands. We've had them challenging the views of these radicalized young people. So also imams who talk from the same book, the Quran, right? And who tell these young people, this is actually not the message in the Quran. This is the message of IS. The Quran is love and peace. So this dialogue is crucial. Yeah.
Yes, religion is a matter of spiritualism, not of hating or trying to killing others, if I understand religion rightly.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So what do you think about the way United Nations system is currently working? Is it up to doing its duty effectively? I understand that United Nations have a good role regarding Millennium Development Goals and SDGs, but is there a need for UN reform for ensuring effectiveness in global peace and security? If so, in what ways?
Yes, I think the United Nations need to be reformed. This is very difficult in practice, by the way, but I see some areas for improvement. Before saying that, I have to say that just like the EU, I think the UN is a great project, right? And the UN has brought us a lot of peace and development and a lot of collaboration between nations who are very different in many ways, but they collaborate for the larger causes, right? For peace, for development. I myself worked with UNICEF for a while, which is a UN agency as well, of course. But I see a few areas for reform. One of them, I think, is that the UN is organized in a very bureaucratic way. So I think we could make the UN more effectively if it was organized in a smarter way, so that it could respond to crisis situations in a faster way, for example. I also think that the Security Council should be reformed, at least its role, because what you see now is when there is a crisis situation somewhere, like for example in Syria, it is very difficult to get a UN mandate to do something, to try to intervene in a as much as possible peaceful way, although that's not always possible. because still there are members in the Security Council who can easily veto any decision, right? Like Russia does that quite a lot, for example. So that means then that when it's very clear that something needs to be done, that you cannot reach a UN mandate. And for our party, because we are also a party that very much believes in peace, so we are against bilateral wars, for example, against between two countries. So our ground rule is basically that we should always have a UN mandate before Dutch troops support to any mission, because it should not be like the Dutch, the British, and the Americans, for example, go to a country, like what happened in Iraq, for example. That's very bad. We are very much against that. But if you want to work through a kind of global mandate reached in the UN, then the system needs to function. And at the moment, in difficult situations like this, it's often not functioning. But having said that, I'm a big fan of the UN in general. I think the UN has brought us a lot and is still bringing us a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think, yeah, you are very much right about this. But for international security, I think that it has UN has got some problem, and reforming it can really help and ensure that there is rules-based world in the future, so that we can follow international norms and rules in international affairs. This is very important. Thank you. And what is, in your opinion, what is modernity? What makes a person modern, and in your case, European and global citizen?
For me, I think, but I think there are different views possible, different answers possible. But for me, being modern means being open for different views and different preferences. So basically, for me, being modern means being open to diversity. So not thinking that the way I'm used to doing things, the way I learned it from my parents, is the only good way of doing things, but to be open and learn from each other. I learned a lot from my time in Bangladesh, for example. I learned a lot from being open to the Bangladeshi culture, because I think there's a lot of great things in the Bangladeshi culture that we might have lost a bit in our culture. So yeah.
Thank you. And Europe has a large role in modernity in terms of building nation states, democracy, freedom of expression, human dignity, and equality. And based on this concept, the whole world, the democratic system works based on this European project of modernity. So, and nowadays we are in a different era in world history where there is rising illiberalism around the world nowadays, including populism and xenophobia. And is this spirit non-Western or not? Because European ideas are about democracy, equality, rule of law, but this illiberalism is all about it opposes this kind of values what Westerns have brought not only within itself but also around the world. So, what are the root causes of this rising illiberalism? Is this a dark side of Europe, what we are witnessing, or is it a phenomena rooted in human nature?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dr. Mojibur. I think in a way it is the latter. I think it is maybe a bit rooted in being human, because if you look at the European history, for example, you've always seen eras of collaboration and of hegemony, you could say, of countries collaborating together, and then periods of collapse, you could say, of people and governments tending more towards the national interests and looking at their own interests without considering the interests of the collective. So I think in a way it's something we've seen happening throughout history. But I hope, and that's my sincere hope, and that's what I stand for as a politician for the Dutch Green Party, I hope that we can overcome this very quickly. I hope that in this case, our European Union, United Nations, and other collaborations that are built on human rights, on justice, on the rule of law, that we can maintain them and make them stronger, and that we will overcome this. But of course, it's difficult to look into the future, but it's something I will fight for to overcome it.
Thank you, Mr. Niels, for your very optimistic note. And Mahatma Gandhi, while studying in the United Kingdom and also working in South Africa, he developed 17 different identities. That is, he was a person of multiple identities, and one identity was not in conflict with another. But in our current world, there is this populism and religious fundamentalism that try to challenge one identity and try to impose one single identity on all others, try to stop others. So people have multiple identities at the same time, as Gandhi represented that. Is it an educational failure or greed for power at someone's cost that causes this kind of narrow identity-based politics?
No, I don't think so. It's more, in my opinion, it comes more from a fear of change and a fear of the unpredicted. Like now, what you see happening now in the Netherlands, for example, during this Corona crisis, is that extreme thinkers and all kinds of complot theories that, for example, that the government of the Netherlands or China or whatever government introduced this virus to get more power, these kind of theories now attract a lot of people. And maybe if you think about it philosophically, because in a way I cannot understand it, but if you think about it philosophically, maybe this is logical. Because when these kind of scary things happen, these kind of big things that are basically bigger than all of us, you start looking for explanations, right? You start looking for explanations. Why this happened? How could this happen? This cannot be a coincidence. And that's why people start looking for reasons. And reality is sometimes very complex. Yes. Like I gave this example of the housing market in the Netherlands, for example. The reason that we don't have enough social housing is because we haven't built enough in the economic crisis. It's because we don't have enough skilled labor to build enough houses. It's because our neoliberal government, who likes capitalism a lot, they liberalized the housing market. So where the government had a big task in it in the past, until a few decades ago, it's now a totally open, free market, at least in theory. It's not if you consider that some people have a lot of the property, but okay, in a way. So there are multiple causes to the problem, but it's very difficult to see that in a comprehensive way and to prove it, that these are the causes. It's much easier to say, no, it's nice that Niels van den Berge from the Dutch Green Party is coming with his difficult, complex story, but this is actually not true. It's because all these immigrants came. That's why we don't have enough houses. It's a very simple answer, to a very complex problem.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And do you think that it has something to do with rapid technological change, like digital revolution has amplified the situation? The problem was always there, but nowadays it's amplified through social media. Do you agree?
Yes, I think in a way it's amplified through social media because everyone can spread any kind of news, also fake news on social media. So that's true. But the opposite is also true, that there's also a lot of progressive messages, modern messages being amplified through the same social media, right? So I think both is true. And if you look at history, you've seen similar things as we see happening now in terms of the rise of extreme views, nationalism, xenophobia. We've seen that in the past as well. We've seen that in Europe in the 1930s as well. So it's not, in that sense, it's not a totally new thing, but I think it's being amplified and maybe accelerated through social media. I think so.
Yeah, thank you. So freedom of expression is a very important factor for ensuring a democratic society and rule of law. So when a speech becomes a hate speech, what is the limit of freedom of expression in your opinion?
Mm-hmm. In my opinion, because in practice it's the judge who, of course, decides in specific. But in my opinion, the freedom of speech the freedom of speech ends where hate speech starts. So once you start saying things like we should be violent to immigrant people, or we should be violent to politicians or to journalists, we should attack them. Yeah, in those circumstances, when you start spreading hate towards other groups in society, that's the limit. Then you start doing doing things that are also illegal in the Netherlands. We have laws against that.
Yeah, thank you. So, what are the best ways governments and immigrants can work together for better integration of immigrants in host society? What is the best way, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think the best way is to organize the dialogue, and from the government perspective, facilitate the dialogue. The Dutch government is also doing that, not always enough. But as I gave this example already about the young people who travel to IS areas to fight, for example, what we did as a national, what the Dutch national government did, but also local governments, is they started working together with local Muslim communities in neighborhoods to talk with these young people, because if a civil servant or a healthcare worker from psychological healthcare worker from the government is going there, they might not reach these young people, but the imam from the local mosque, he can. So it's very important in that way to work together, to tackle problems together, and we do that in many areas. This is just one example, but we do this in many areas.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Germany and probably Sweden has a program to use skilled immigrant experts in their country of origin under the development cooperation budget. Does Netherlands support such idea? Should other EU member states support this noble idea? Your suggestions?
Yes, I think it's a very good way to learn more together and to reach further together. We have programs that are somewhat similar to the German program, but not at the same scale. But some universities in the Netherlands, for example, they host students from upcoming countries such as Bangladesh, and then they study a while in the Netherlands to acquire new knowledge and skills, and then they go back to their home countries to finish their education and to work in development projects and other things. So we have that to some extent, but not at the scale that Germany has it. Germany is really, if you ask me, is really an example for other European countries in this sense.
Yeah, thank you. And Netherlands has an organization called Bashug by Vikas Chaudhuri Borua. He's the chairman of that, Diaspora and Development.
Very well. Yes.
He is working on this issue on European basis, as trying to lobby the European Union so that more Bangladeshi experts, skilled people can go back to Bangladesh and work there and give them some European idea in their own language. So I think that would be a very interesting thing. I hope it implements in the ground.
Yes, it's very interesting, and I know Mr. Bikash Da very well. We are in close contact also. Yeah.
He also lives in The Hague, right?
Yeah, not in The Hague, but in the Netherlands, not so far from here. But we meet each other every now and then. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. And before we are almost near ending this program, but do you have some suggestion to youths, Bengali-speaking youths or English-speaking youths of Bengali origin across the world that about becoming successful in their career? What are needed for becoming successful in career?
Well, it's of course important to study, like to choose a subject and a study that suits you. I think it's very important, but as far as I know, most Bangladeshi people that I met are already very curious. But I think curiosity is very important, to be very open-minded to different options, different views. I think that's very important, and I think learning languages is very important. And I would not recommend people necessarily to learn Dutch, because we are a tiny country, but definitely learning English, for example, or Spanish, which is a very large language as well in the world. That helps a lot as well, of course.
Yeah, and at last, do say something to our Bengali audience in Bengali.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ সবাই। আমি খুব খুশি ছিলাম, আবার দেখা হবে।
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Niels Vandenberg. I thank you, Mr. Niels Vandenberg, MP, member of Dutch Parliament, for giving British Bangla News your valuable time. I wish you serve Dutch people and people of Europe as well as the world more effectively in the future. I also thank the
ধন্যবাদ।
audience. Dhanyabad. I also thank the audience of British Bangla News in Europe, Bangladesh, and elsewhere in the world for watching this program. Stay safe, save yourself from corona epidemic, and let others stay safe. Bye for now.